The Sannin have an extremely legendary status within the world of Naruto, not only in terms of power, but politically as well. Their name carries a great deal of weight throughout the 5 nations, so much so that Orochimaru's attack on Konoha had spooked the Raikage into wanting to learn new jutsu, likely due to fear for his own life. Today I'll be going over how strong they are, as well as some of their abilities. For this I'll be primarily sticking to the manga and data books, but I'll also include a few things from the anime for those of you that want to use it. First, I'd like to address a lot of incorrect things people in this community tend to say when trying to scale the Sannin. I've touched on some of this before in other videos, but I just want to reiterate these things again so you guys can better understand where I think the Sannin scale compared to other Naruto characters. Okay, so first off, none of the Sannin scale to Pain. Pain is one of those characters like Minato and Itachi that have been portrayed as a higher level than the Sannin, and the weekly release in the manga says this virtually word for word, stating that even someone of Sage Jiraiya's caliber is made to feel shock, amazement, and despair when facing Pain, with Jiraiya even admitting Pain will kill him at the rate the fight was going, after all his strongest attacks failed to do anything against Pain. The manga also says Pain is invincible and violent compared to Tsunade, and he calls her power meaningless. Also, if you look at the video game, Pain violates and bisects Orochimaru with Almighty Push when recruiting him to join the Akatsuki.
Almighty Push!
So it's fair to say the narrative within the series, that being the manga, and outside the series, that being the video game or anime continuity, consistently portrays the Sannin as being inferior to Pain. You don't see too much of this anymore, but some people also have a problem with Sage Naruto beating Sage Jiraiya and the other Sannin, even though he's verbatim stated several times to have surpassed him. I really just don't see how people can't grasp this, but the whole narrative building up to the Pain fight is that Naruto is training to surpass Jiraiya, this is stated by Tsunade, and defeat an opponent that he couldn't, that being Pain. We obviously know that Pain killed Jiraiya. So hear me out. Fukusaku says while training Naruto back in chapter 418, having a better sage mode than Jiraiya may mean that Naruto exceeds him as a sage in the volume summary direct. So just to give a quick rundown for those of you who may be new to scaling Naruto or are just more interested in learning more about the series, the 3 legendary Sannin, aka Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade, are some of the strongest shinobi in Konoha history, and are widely considered to be the strongest shinobi, up there with the Kage according to the data books. The Sannin are always presented as being shinobi that are on the same level in terms of overall combative ability, while all having their own unique powers and fighting styles, with the data book and characters like Ebisu indicating that to take down one of the Sannin, you would need another Sannin's help. But obviously, we can interpret this to mean you would need someone who is Sannin level or stronger, i.e. Pain, Itachi, MS Sasuke, Sage Mode Naruto. This is also supported by their team's nickname, the 3 Deadlock, which is a metaphor used to symbolize how their different fighting styles, strengths, and weaknesses, they are all a match for one another. At least in base, this is going to be supported by some stuff we'll go over later. So I'll start things off here by going over Orochimaru as he appeared during part 1 when he launched Konoha Crush. Even though Orochimaru is on the same level as Jiraiya and Tsunade, he is implied heavily by the manga and some anime material to be the strongest out of the Sannin in base. Hiruzen implies he thinks this during the fight with Orochimaru, and Orochimaru implies whenever he and Jiraiya fought that he always won. However, due to other statements surrounding the Sannin, we know even if you want to say Orochimaru is superior to the other Sannin, that he would beat them in a fight, they are all still on the same level in terms of combat. Orochimaru is just at the tippity top of this level. The easiest way to scale this form of Orochimaru is by using his fight with old Hiruzen. The manga, data books, fan books, and anime all portray Hiruzen versus Orochimaru as an incredibly close fight, with both of them stated to be equals numerous times. A lot of people will immediately ask,
wait, wasn't Hiruzen holding back / mentally nerfed?
And while that's true, the second data book states that Orochimaru was playing around with Hiruzen and viewed the fight as a boring pastime, and is stated to be stronger than Hiruzen to some degree numerous times outside of this encounter. Hiruzen also only actually begins to compete with Orochimaru after getting super amped by his desire to protect Konoha, so the narrative seems to indicate that they are at least around the same level, but you can argue Oro edges him out via some databook statements. Next, to quickly go over how strong old Hiruzen is, we need to take a look at some of the statements surrounding him back in part 1. Kabuto says Hiruzen has a reputation of being the strongest of the 5 Kage at the time, and while you could say people like A trained and got stronger after this, there are some ways to say this still means Hiruzen and people should be above that Kage level, as Kage level is a meta because we know not all Kage are the same strength. Even while mentally nerfed and arguably fatigued, Hiruzen still goes toe to toe with the Edo Hokage and with the Anbu described as a Hokage level battle, with the second databook confirming this. Depending on how you interpret these and a fanbook statement that calls the title of the Hokage the top of the ninja world, you could argue being Hokage level puts you above the other Kage, but I'll admit that's a little too edgy when you look at some of the things that Kages like A do during the time of the war arc. So ultimately, this should mean even while weakened, Hiruzen is still a Kage level combatant, which supports the Sannin being around that level in their base forms. While most of Orochimaru's scaling comes from part 1, he remains a pretty strong villain compared to the others we see in Naruto, even going into early part 2. Numerous characters, including Sasuke himself, say the only reason that Sasuke was able to beat Orochimaru was due to Orochimaru being weakened by the Reaper Death Seal and the illness caused by his body rejecting him. Deidara, one of the most arrogant Akatsuki members, who has a whole beef with Orochimaru, not kidding, the only reason Deidara even fought Sasuke was because he was pissed he killed Orochimaru before he could, and he even says he can't believe Orochimaru would lose to someone like Heavy Sasuke, who's actually stronger than the Sasuke who fought Orochimaru, after seeing him fight. Now, when it comes to Orochimaru's abilities, he's well known for having a pretty wide and diverse arsenal of techniques that range from different kinds of summoning jutsu to poisons, healing, and other powerful ninjutsu. But before we get into those, I want to quickly touch on how powerful his aura and presence is. As I said before, Orochimaru is viewed as one of the most frightening characters in the verse, and one of the reasons for this is his ability to strike fear in people at just a glance. This has been enough to make Jonin level characters like Part 1 Kakashi and Kabuto view fighting Orochimaru as insane and had them frozen in place, literally just shitting themselves. Orochimaru is able to do this to Kabuto even after being weakened by the loss of his arms. So based on this, we can reach the conclusion that Jonin can't even step to Orochimaru. And with these two particular Jonin, Kabuto and Kakashi, you could even argue that he could do this to opponents of even Kage level. So yeah, Orochimaru is definitely pretty strong off of just his aura alone. Let's get into some of Orochimaru's abilities. Orochimaru's fighting style mainly centered around his talent in ninjutsu, in particular his skill with summoning based techniques. With various forms of summoning jutsu, Orochimaru can summon small snakes from his mouth and sleeves to bind or attack his enemy, or giant sage snakes like Manda, who was beating Gamabunta and Katsuya at the same time, blades like his sword of Kusanagi, and with the Edo Tensei, he can summon and make pawns out of the most powerful shinobi like the first and second Hokage, albeit much weaker than they appeared during the war arc. And if you want to use the anime, he can also summon the third Kazekage with Edo Tensei. He can also summon the Rashomon gates to defend himself and absorb, disperse, and suppress oncoming attacks. And even while arguably weakened and without the soul of his arms, he was still able to summon 3. This is pretty impressive since base Hashirama summons only 2 more than him, but you could also say that this is more of a casual feat for Hashirama. Orochimaru is also incredibly skilled with sealing jutsu, and we see this when he tampers with Minato's seal placed on Naruto, as well as the curse seal he can use to paralyze his targets. Orochimaru is also talented when it comes to elemental jutsu, with the 4th databook listing him as being able to use all 7 basic nature transformations. Sadly, the only one we actually get to see Orochimaru use is Wind Style, which the databook says he can use to casually make hurricanes, Earth Style, which he can use to make mud clones, and a few offensive fire style techniques he used against Sasuke in the Forest of Death. A lot of Orochimaru's hacks that make him so hard to kill stem from the many experiments he had conducted over the years in order to enhance his body. Orochimaru's healing factor and serpentine anatomy Both stem from what the databook calls the power of the white snake. It is implied he acquired this ability when he went to Ryuchi Cave to learn Sage Mode and turned into a snake after failing to properly absorb the nature energy when the Great Snake Sage bit him. This is also what allows Orochimaru to survive lethal attacks by reconnecting himself with snakes or shedding his skin, heal from injuries at a rapid rate, and the ability to use his true form, a large serpent made of smaller serpents that can regenerate. Orochimaru's blood also has a toxin that when exposed to the air becomes a powerful paralytic. The third databook says this is also what allows Orochimaru to use his strongest jutsu, the 8 branches technique, which uses the power of the white snake to transform Orochimaru into a giant Kusanagi wielding hydra that can regrow its heads. This form of Orochimaru is stated to be bigger than even Manda and surpass Orochimaru himself. Outside of that, you could use Pain's statement to say he might be on par with Sage Jiraiya and pre-war 100 healing Tsunade, but that's about all since he doesn't really do anything in this form other than get folded by a blind deathbed Itachi. I forgot to mention this earlier, but being stronger than Hebi Sasuke should be enough to put Orochimaru and by extension the other base Sannin above most of the low-level Akatsuki members, since Sasuke is implied by the manga and third data book to be stronger than the grunt-level Akatsuki members we were first introduced to, like Deidara, Kakuzu, Hidan, and possibly Konan as well. This is kind of supported by the first fan book in the anime profile guides, which imply that Orochimaru was seen as the strongest and most feared villain at the time. While this obviously wouldn't include people stronger than Orochimaru like Obito, Pain, or Itachi, who maybe just aren't as well known as the Sannin at this point in time, it should still support Orochimaru being superior than a lot of other Akatsuki members and help you guys understand how Orochimaru is viewed in the actual story. Moving on to Jiraiya, since all the base Sannin are around the same level, we can pretty much use Orochimaru and Old Hiruzen as measuring sticks to see how strong Jiraiya and Tsunade are. Like I said earlier, while Orochimaru is strong enough to beat base Jiraiya, they are still on the same level, with the first databook telling us this verbatim. Orochimaru and Jiraiya's dynamic mirrors Naruto and Sasuke's rivalry in part 1, and the second databook puts it this way. Jiraiya basically keeps up with Orochimaru's talent and development of forbidden ninjutsu through what the databook calls Spartan training, brutal combat, and basically the resolve to always preserve. So what we can gather from this is that while Orochimaru may be more talented and have better ninjutsu than Jiraiya, he reaches this level through sheer physical strength, so he'd at least be a match for him physically, like how Naruto would combat Sasuke's strength in part 1. While you can probably say Tsunade is physically superior to Orochimaru and Jiraiya due to some stuff I'll touch on later, you can argue Jiraiya could still beat her with his ninjutsu or hacks, since he still thinks he can kill her even after acknowledging her physical strength. Base Jiraiya being on par with the other Sannin and Old Hiruzen would also place him in this ninjutsu Jiraiya learned at Mount Miyaboku. He has surpassed the techniques of the other villages since the Shinobi Wars. This would mean, at least at the point in the series, Jiraiya's numerous toad-based jutsu were superior to the magnet style of Kazekage's, Mei's lava and vapor style, the Raikage's lightning cloak, and even Inoki's particle style. And while that may sound a little crazy, like I said before, some characters like A go on to become stronger, and when we go over some abilities of Jiraiya's, this will start to make more sense. Jiraiya, like Orochimaru, has a wide variety of useful techniques in his arsenal that range from toad summons and elemental jutsu to the Rasengan and different types of sealing jutsu. A lot of Jiraiya's abilities revolve around his skill with the summoning jutsu, like Orochimaru and his snakes. Jiraiya's contact with the toads at Mount Miyaboku that allow him to summon numerous toads who can assist him in combat, like Gamaken or his main summon Gamabunta, who is stated to be the strongest of the giant toads, and is powerful enough to fight not only a fully transformed Gaara, but Manda as well alongside Katsuyi. Jiraiya's skill with the summoning jutsu goes even further than this. He can also summon the belly of the giant fire-breathing toad to trap and consume enemies. Jiraiya is also shown to be skilled in elemental ninjutsu, specifically fire style and earth style. Jiraiya has been shown to use many offensive fire style attacks like his flame bombs, or the combination ninjutsu he uses with Gamabunta. Jiraiya can also use earth style to create swamps big enough to sink enemies like Orochimaru's giant snakes. Jiraiya is also one of the few people to have mastered the Rasengan, which the databook says is among the highest grade of power among ninjutsu. that do not require hand seals. In the anniversary guide, that actually shows an image depicting Jiraiya using a flaming Rasengan, like how he does in some of the video games. You can definitely make an argument for him being able to use a fire style Rasengan. Orochimaru also implies that Jiraiya's skill in sealing jutsu was on par with that of himself and Hiruzen, and we even see as much with Jiraiya easily undoing the seal Orochimaru placed on Kid Naruto, and being able to lock and unlock the seal Minato placed on Naruto, as well as developing sealing tags capable of suppressing some of the Nine Tails chakra, which Kakashi was able to use to suppress KM3 Naruto, or Three Tails. I also want to quickly touch on Jiraiya's Sage Mode, which when used with Mon Pa dramatically increases the strength of Jiraiya's ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu, which is often defined by strength and speed. So this form, like Orochimaru's Hydra and Tsunade's strength of 100 healing seal, takes Jiraiya beyond the level he was previously and give him access to even crazier and stronger abilities than in base. For example, in Sage Mode, Jiraiya can create his Master Rasengan big enough to easily carve away a mountain according to the third data book, and can use fire style 10 times larger than what he uses in base due to toad oil that can reach temperatures of up to several thousand degrees Celsius, which would be way hotter than our Earth's sun. Sage Jiraiya also has Mon Pa for support, who along with assisting in ninjutsu attacks can use the Toad Song, which binds a target's psyche and is what the third data book calls the most powerful genjutsu, which can arguably mean Sage Jiraiya's Toad Song is more powerful than even Tsukuyomi. Another thing I want to note about this genjutsu is that it worked on Pain, who is shown to have numerous genjutsu barriers, and this is probably what made Pain say the secret of how his abilities worked is what enabled the other paths to avoid genjutsu and beat Jiraiya, and he may have lost all 6 paths if they were all out. You can say Pain's statement implies Sage Jiraiya is on par with Orochimaru's Hydra and Tsunade's strength of 100 seal at that point, and if you use the anime where Jiraiya still lost but actually fought all 6 paths of Pain.
Oh God, you'd lose.
Maybe say the statement from Pain Art Kakashi implies he's not as strong as Sage Jiraiya yet. Last but not least, let's go over Tsunade. While Tsunade definitely doesn't display the same level of versatility as Orochimaru and Jiraiya in terms of her arsenal, she reaches their level of combat and is still a match for them in base, according to multiple sources like the fan book, due to her raw physical strength. We see this pretty frequently during the earlier parts of the manga, with Jiraiya basically admitting inferiority to her in terms of physical combat and implying she's still strong enough to mess him up as bad as she did when she almost killed him. This is also supported by Orochimaru warning Kabuto that she could one-shot them with her kicks, and while Orochimaru was weakened, the databook tells us no one could receive this kick from Tsunade and avoid being pulverized. The anniversary guide also says this kick has enough power to blow away a country if you're looking for a way to visualize how strong this kick from Tsunade is. So in order to understand how strong Tsunade is throughout the series, we need to talk about her Will of Fire that she inherited from the other Hokage and how it relates to her strength. Tsunade, like many other shinobi from Konoha, like Kakashi, Hiruzen, and Naruto, shares her grandfather's philosophy known as the Will of Fire. Tsunade's willpower acts as a source for Tsunade's strength, and she, as well as the manga, tell us these words verbatim. This is also why her strength fluctuates so much during the series. Back during the Second War, Tsunade was considered to be the strongest ninja alongside Orochimaru and Jiraiya. But after experiencing trauma due to the loss of her lover Dan and younger brother Nawaki, she lost the will to fight and regressed in strength. By the time we see Tsunade in part 1, she's become rusty and is consumed by grief and her gambling habits. This also explains why initially no arms of Orochimaru and Kabuto are able to keep up with her, and the fact that Kabuto boosted his physical energy with a ration pill once Tsunade started to get tired. However, after meeting Naruto and noticing the similarities between him, Dan, and Nawaki, who all dreamed of becoming Hokage, the databook says this reignites the Will of Fire within Tsunade and inspires her to put her life on the line. This revived the once great Sannin, so you could say this is when she overcame her regression and rose back up to Jiraiya and Orochimaru's level. We also see this again during the war arc where against Madara, Tsunade says that her true power lies in the Will of Fire. After Madara's plan to demoralize her backfires, we see she becomes strong enough to tear apart his Susanoo, much to Madara's surprise. However, I do want to note that Tsunade was probably only able to accomplish these feats against Madara due to this mental amp and the fact that he was holding back. So like I said, while Tsunade doesn't have as many abilities as Jiraiya and Orochimaru, she still has some pretty interesting ones we should go over. While Tsunade is mainly known for her straightforward beatdown fighting style, her skills in medical ninjutsu give her access to a lot of useful abilities in combat. With her knowledge of the human body and more specifically the nervous system, Tsunade can use lightning style to rewire the brain signals and nervous system sends to the brain and make the opponent move in different directions. And while Kabuto was able to figure this out, as he portrayed as one of the smartest characters in the series, even considered smarter than people like Orochimaru and Tobirama, Tsunade's biggest asset in combat is her Yin Seal. With the Yin Seal, Tsunade can use techniques like Creation Rebirth, which she can use to regrow organs and limbs, the technique 100 Healings, which uses chakra that has been continuously siphoned into the seal for years to give the user an insane amp. With the 100 Healings, Tsunade was stronger than even Lightened A according to Madara and was capable of damaging his Susanoo on multiple occasions. And while she was slower than him, also according to Madara, we see that she can still properly time her attacks in coordination with him and Inoki. However, it is important to note that we see on numerous occasions that Tsunade isn't durable enough to tank the level of the force she outputs. And even with her mental amps, she should cap right below the War Arc Sakura that unlocked the Yin Seal, since the data books as well as numerous characters in the manga imply Sakura has surpassed Tsunade by this point. While this is probably just an indication to the audience from Kishimoto, Hashirama says Sakura may have surpassed Tsunade and she was like 5 when he died, so maybe that was the prime Tsunade was talking about in part 1, who knows. But seriously, all jokes aside, Tsunade at the absolute strongest is slightly weaker than the Sakura that fought alongside KCM1 Naruto and EMS Sasuke. Lastly, like the other Sannin, Tsunade is skilled with the summoning jutsu and has her own boss summon Katsuyu. Katsuyu is considered to be in the same league as Manda and Gamabunta in terms of strength, and this is only 5% of Katsuyu's full body, which is so big that it encompasses the entire Shikotsu forest, and Sakura and Tsunade working together can only summon 1/10 of her body. Katsuyu also has the ability to heal others, avoid attacks by splitting into smaller slugs, spit acid so corrosive that Orochimaru implies it can kill him, and can even heal Tsunade and others in coordination with the Yin Seal. So as you guys can see, while the Sannin aren't as strong as characters like Pain, Itachi, MS Sasuke, or Sage Naruto, they are still some of the strongest characters in the series, some of the most beloved by the fandom, and they should still scale above Jonin class fighters like pre-war Kakashi, Hebi Sasuke, and most of the Akatsuki. And with their wide range of abilities, you can make a lot of strong arguments for them beating Kage, and I want this video to be a fair analysis, so I don't really need to take it any further than that. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe, and other than that, have a nice day.